Welcome to Young Money with Tracy Bissett, the advice show for young millionaires in the making. It's time for some $1 Million Straight Talk with Tracy, President and Chief Financial Fitness Trainer at Bissett Financial Fitness. Each week, Tracy's going to tell you what you need to know now at the beginning of your earning curve. Basic and advanced financial concepts made clear, healthy money habits and the missteps to avoid, and all the stuff that you can do to set yourself up for a future of fantastic financial freedom. Ready to lace up and start this week's financial fitness training? Let's do it, Tracy.
Welcome to the Young Money Podcast. I'm so pleased today we've got such a special guest, Brittany Pickrem. Welcome to the show, Brittany.
Hey, Tracy. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. It's my pleasure. So Brittany Pickrem is the owner and designer of her self-made boutique agency based in downtown Halifax, Nova Scotia. Brittany helps her customers to amplify their brand by standing out with a smart and sophisticated look and feel. Over the past 11 years, she has worked with a range of customers from nonprofit organizations to large corporations across North America and the UK. So welcome again, Brittany.
Oh, thank you, Tracy.
So I'd love it if you can tell us in your own words a little bit more about your business and kind of how it got started.
Yeah. So essentially, you said it all in the intro there, but I really do help my customers to show up with a professional and polished look and feel for all of their promotional materials. So that really ranges from everything from a full branded suite, like your logo design, your website design, social media graphics, to smaller printed promotional materials like business cards and postcards. So really anything that you can dream of that you'd like to promote your business with, I can build it. And that's what I do for my customers.
Oh, that's fantastic. And for those of us who aren't that familiar with agencies and what they do, what training did you get to be able to do this kind of work and have this kind of business?
Really, it was, I'm a proud graduate of Nova Scotia Community College, and they really gave me a fantastic foundation to really start my career off. So they sort of supplied me with a lot of practical skills and knowledge, so around like software and just general know-how. But I would say a lot of my training really honestly happened on the job, and it was a lot of trial by fire. So really in my field, you're just constantly learning all the time. So I would say a lot of my learning happened on the job, but as well formally at NSCC.
Oh, that's great. And so I've used your work before. So for those of you who are listening to the podcast, you have seen Brittany's work. She did the album cover art for the podcast, which I love. So thank you very much, Brittany.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
And so when you think about what's happened over the years in your business, because I imagine you probably started out purely from kind of a technician standpoint, how would you say you've evolved over the years?
Well, yeah, actually, I love it that you brought this up because really for the last pretty much decade that I've been a designer, I've really just been that, and I've been an employee for somebody else. So essentially somebody would give me an order and I would fill it. And that's really how I built a lot of my career. And I think a lot of creative people begin their careers this way. So you kind of hone your craft, you become a really great designer, and in effect, you become a really effective employee. But that really doesn't serve you when you start your own business. And in fact, you need a whole different skill set altogether. So over the years, over the past couple years in particular, I really transitioned from technician to CEO just because I started my own business and I absolutely needed to do that. And I quickly realized I was completely unprepared to really step into the spotlight and own that space in that way. Like I was a really proficient designer, but it became very clear that I was not a very good CEO of my business to begin with. So that was definitely a huge barrier for me at first as a creative person.
Because I'm imagining in your program, they were teaching you all the technical things and how to amplify your creative and your natural abilities. But I imagine there was no courses on accounting and finance and marketing and all of those kind of business-based skills?
Absolutely none of that whatsoever. So yeah, it was, the past couple of years have been pretty pretty interesting and challenging with honing more of that business skill and that CEO mindset.
And I would say my background is in banking, and certainly we've worked with so many entrepreneurs over the years. That's completely natural and completely normal. People tend to start businesses in something they're passionate about, something they're really good at, and the business part often comes later because they just excel at whatever their craft is. So I would say you're in good company, as most entrepreneurs are in the exact same boat as you.
Yeah, that's actually refreshing to hear that, because you don't think about that right away when you're in the thick of it. You're just like, oh, I'm just not naturally good at this, and it's something I need to improve. So it's actually reassuring to hear that.
Well, I'd love it if you can tell the listeners a little bit about your background, because you've achieved so much success today at a really young age. And what would you attribute that to?
Yeah. So I like to say, and I'm sure that anybody listening can kind of come to this conclusion already. I really am an accidental entrepreneur, 100%. So how did I arrive at my success today? Definitely a lot of persistence and a lot of grit. I've heard no, that you can't do that right from the beginning, even before I started my career. And I was thinking about becoming a graphic designer right up into like pretty much almost every other month. I hear no all the time. So I think it takes a lot of persistence and grit to move forward with doing what you want to do. Also, over the past couple of years in particular, when I've been making this transition to being more of a business owner and entering the CEO headspace, something that has been absolutely crucial in that is being part of a strong network of fellow entrepreneurs. I can't tell you how valuable that this has been for me. And I know, Tracy, we're together in this incubator group together. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I would have not had a business had I not had this strong network of fellow women in business, and like really being inspired by these women and knowing that I'm not alone in being an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. So that's absolutely been really crucial, and something that we've talked about a lot already. Just absolutely shedding the employee skin and then just stepping into the owner skin and mindset. That's been absolutely really honestly career changing for me, and honestly life changing too. There's a lot of personal changes and mindset changes that had to happen for me to allow that to really step into the space that I'm in currently. So those are definitely some of the things that I were the key factors in really shaping where I'm at right now.
And I imagine since you were young, persistence and grit was always part of your personality, and you were always trying new things. And so I love these key success factors as you laid them out for us. So number one being the persistence and grit. Number two, having the support and seeking out the support that you need so that you can continue to make that growth. And number three, just being open to new possibilities and being open to doing things in a different way and actually seeing things in a different way, the way your mind is thinking about it. So that move from technician to CEO mindset and really just being open to that. I think that's great. And that can serve anybody who's listening really well, no matter whether you have your own business or you're starting a career, because all of those things help people be successful.
Yes, absolutely.
And certainly, I think we've known each other just coming up 2 years, I think this December. And so, as you mentioned, we're part of the same incubator group. So we work with our coach, Eleanor Beaton, who's based in Windsor, Nova Scotia. And so one of the great things about that group is the friendships that you create and the support system that you create. So you know that other people are going through the same things as you. Sometimes you may be ahead of someone on a certain thing, and then at other times you're asking for advice. So I think that support is really invaluable.
Yes, I could not agree more.
So when you think about things that have gone on in your life, what would you say is the biggest turning point or revelation in your life from a financial perspective?
Yeah, I think the biggest financial revelation for me has actually come to me somewhat recently. And it almost goes without saying, as a creative, I'm not naturally numbers oriented. But I think my biggest revelation is that I'm totally in control of my numbers. So what I used to do, I used to sort of hide from my numbers. And when I say numbers, I mean revenue, I mean expenses, pretty much all that data I would completely hide from it, and really that started at a very young age, and being uncomfortable even in math class. And I think that actually started to roll into being an entrepreneur and not having that comfort around those. So my revelation is that I'm totally in control of it, and it's nothing to be afraid of.
So I'm sure that didn't just happen one night. You just decided, I'm not going to be afraid of numbers anymore.
No, no. Absolutely not. So, again, like being part of this group, it's really made me begin to focus on those things. And part of being a CEO is really having a great understanding of your numbers. So when I became intentional with my numbers and I put some attention towards them as well, things really began to change. So instead of hiding from them, I actually directly looked at them. And I started, honestly, I just opened up an Excel spreadsheet and I started tracking every single sale. And I even started doing that with my expenses so I could see exactly what was going in and what was going out. It wasn't a very sophisticated approach, but it just made me start to look at things. And when I brought that awareness to the numbers, it was really interesting what happened. Uh, I set a revenue goal. That's another really key part, is setting goals for your numbers. And I totally surpassed it, to my like complete shock. So really, instead of hiding from something, I brought awareness to it, and it totally changed things around, which was like very like a huge revelation as well.
Well, then it actually gave you something to be so proud of and something to celebrate because you made a goal for yourself and you surpassed it.
Yeah, yeah, and that felt amazing.
And we talk often about goal setting on the show, and goals are a place to guide us. And so sometimes you don't hit your goals, and that's okay. There's reasons for it, but having that direction and that focus, and as you said, being intentional and putting attention to it certainly um, drives what you're looking for and kind of attracts it to you.
Yeah, yeah, it makes all the difference.
And I love what you said about just creating your Excel spreadsheet. People often think that you need to do something really sophisticated. You got to have some fancy software or some program to actually get the numbers and get the data that you're looking for. But it is as simple as opening an Excel spreadsheet and just starting to put the numbers in. And you alluded to it when you talked about tracking your revenues and your expenses. And I love cash flow. I love to talk about cash flow. I work it in almost every episode if I can. And so that timing of when your revenue's coming in and your expenses going out, that's really stressful sometimes for entrepreneurs because you may be making money, but people haven't paid you yet, but you have to pay your bills. And so I'm sure that brought a little bit more comfort knowing, okay, I'm going to have the cash flow that I need to be able to meet all my obligations.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, it did. And just a lot more insight around that. And your numbers, like, as you know, Tracy, they don't lie. So they can tell you where you're doing really well and where you need to be doing better. So like really, if you want some very honest feedback about how things are going in your business, you just need to look at that Excel spreadsheet and you can see exactly where you're going.
And I like how you put it that you started doing that and you're gaining the confidence and it's certainly giving you wins to celebrate. And then over time, I know you've started tracking different metrics. And so starting small and building up as your knowledge grows is really important theme, I think, because you don't need to try to tackle everything right at once.
Yeah, absolutely. I think baby steps with that, especially for anybody who's like me and you just want to be an ostrich and stick your head in the sand. um, just don't be afraid and just start small and then let it go from there. You'll probably actually develop a bit of a love for numbers once you start doing that.
Well, especially when you're surpassing your goals, it's pretty exciting to want to check them every day.
Oh, yes. Yes. And then it just makes you want to get better and better too. It's a little game to play with yourself to get going to a better place with the numbers.
So you have heard that, listeners. Brittany is telling us that numbers are fun, and it's just like a game, which is great. And so I don't know if there's anything you want to add on it, but is there anything you wish you knew when you were younger about money or personal finance?
Oh, yes. Yes, there is, Tracy. I definitely, I think I grew up in a very kind of fearful and scarcity based mindset around money. And because of that, I really had a general lack of financial education, particularly around taxes. So I really wish that I was not so scared of these numbers a lot earlier on, and I would have had a lot more. I would have been a lot more advanced than even where I'm at now. I think it's better to start late than never with absolutely anything,
Mm-hmm.
but really overcoming like that fearful sort of mindset around numbers. And it's interesting, like it's I think that happened from a very young age, and it's hard to reverse things that you learn when you're really young. But I definitely wish that I had more financial education training when I was younger. I just think it would have really made a difference for me. Even just starting my business a couple of years ago, it really just would have given me a lot more insight that I would have needed to put myself in a better spot immediately.
Yeah, and that was one of the genesis for the show, is to just help people break down barriers, break down any myths or things, just unknowns around money. And so I'm really glad that you mentioned that. I've done some work with children at very young ages, and when you have a 4-year-old tell you that money is evil, like there's obviously some things going on in that household that form that view that she has. And so it's
Yeah.
really startling how quickly and how young you actually develop these kind of thoughts around money, whether or not you understand really what's driving it, but you certainly have a feeling towards it in a general sense.
Yeah, yeah, and that's, obviously, passed down from your parents as well, right? So I just think financial literacy and education never ever hurts, and it's something that, I think should be more of a requirement because it really does make that difference when you have that knowledge around numbers and that control and knowing that you have that control around that.
Excellent. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
And so, as I mentioned, you've accomplished a lot at such a very young age, and it's going to be very exciting to see where you continue to take your business and what happens in the future. I'd love it if you could share some best practices or some do's for some entrepreneurs out there, or people who are starting to think that maybe that's the right path for them. And then once we hear about that, if you want to give us some things, maybe harder lessons learned and maybe things to avoid for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, I would say really make friends with your fears. Avoiding them never ever ends up working out in your favor. Not only do I have a fear with numbers, I also have a great fear of public speaking as well. So, so this year in particular, I fed myself to the wolves a couple times, and I went to a front of a room and I started talking about really what it is that I do, and it was honestly really, really scary for me because part of being a CEO is standing in the spotlight rather than sitting behind a computer. So the first time I did a talk, I thought for sure that I might pass out, but I didn't. I actually successfully completed my first talk ever, and it felt really good to really face that fear and just go for it. So if there's anybody that's listening and your fear is public speaking, just go do it. Absolutely go do it. It's just going to make you stronger and better, which actually leads me to my next point. If you actively work on strengthening your weaknesses, you're only going to be a better person and a better leader of your business. Or even if you're not in a business, even if you're working for somebody else, it's just going to give you that greater sense of confidence when you can conquer something that really makes you afraid. So absolutely go ahead and do that earlier than later. And I think it'll just push you that much further.
Mm-hmm. And you haven't mentioned it, but I know it's a theme in your life, and certainly from what you told us today, even in the face of people telling you no, I think listening to what you want to do and being confident enough to hear the inner voice that you have, and really kind of taking a calculated risk, because you went out and got the training and something you were passionate about, and then made a life in it.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that you mentioned that. So definitely that's where that persistence and grit came in that I'm talking about before. And you're going to have a lot of people that like to tell you no early on, and discourage you from doing what you really want to do. And I think that if you know it in your gut that this is your path, you have to just tune everything else out and just go for that. It really doesn't matter what anybody thinks. You just have to go for it and do that. Even if it's, really difficult or it's really challenging, it's absolutely something that you have to do. And I know it's just easy to say that, and it's very, very difficult to actually do it. And I think it's also important to mention that to do it in your own timeline as well. Life is not a race; it is a marathon, and you are in it for the long haul. Your career is the long haul. And really, you have to be in a place where you are really happy with your career because it's such a huge part of your life. So, take your time to really do what you want to do and tune out anybody that says otherwise. It's just, you have to go for what you want.
Fantastic advice, Brittany. Now, if there's some things that you've learned the hard way, potentially, that other people don't need to learn that way and they can learn from listening to you today, what would be some tips in terms of things not to do?
Oh, some things not to do. Absolutely, giving into your fears. I would say, definitely don't listen to your fears. Can kind of cultivate a mindset where you're always growing and always getting better. So if you feel like you've already learned everything you can learn and you've stopped learning, that's really not a good mindset to be in. So always be like a lifelong learner and always never stop learning.
Excellent. And so I know that you're really busy right now. There's lots of stuff that you're working on. What are you working on right now, and where can our listeners go to learn more about you, Brittany?
Yeah. Currently, I just released a new ebook called The 5 Must-Have Elements of a Great Brand. And this really teaches my readers how they can show up powerfully with their brand so that they can attract their ideal customers. So you can find that at brittanypickrem.com. And actually, I think, Tracy, you're going to post a link for that
Absolutely.
too. Yeah, and I have another public speaking engagement coming up at the end of this month. I'm really excited about that. And you can also find me online pretty much anywhere on Instagram at Branding by Brittany. So Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, pretty much any social media platform of choice, you can find me on there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Brittany. I really enjoyed our chat today, and I know that the listeners will be enjoying it as well. So a few of the things that I'm taking away, I loved what you said about creative types and just probably there being that natural tendency to be afraid of numbers or uncomfortable with them. And so to take control of your numbers and to bring it intention and attention to it, and just to really start with those baby steps to get a handle on it. And then you can really see whether it's in your personal life or your business, it gives you back control. And so you don't need to be worried about what's going to happen. You can actually make plans to deal with what's going on. I love the do's that you said about making friends with your fears. Certainly if you have some areas you're uncomfortable with or you don't feel are as strong, actively working on them. And really listening to yourself and trusting yourself to take those calculated risks and to know what's right for you. A theme that comes up often on the show, which you reiterated, is actually around the lifelong learning. And so I think all of those things will put our listeners in really good stead if they incorporate even just one of them in their lives, whether they're in careers or starting businesses. And so listeners, you can also check out Brittany's new ebook, The 5 Must-Have Elements of a Great Brand. And so thank you again, Brittany, so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Tracy. This has been fun.
There you have it, listeners. Brittany Pickrem from Halifax, Nova Scotia. Take good care, and until next time, stay financially fit.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. To all you millionaires in the making out there, if you love this podcast, please subscribe on iTunes to keep your financial fitness training going. Oh, and leave us a review. And be sure to visit Bissett, 2 S's, 2 T's, financialfitness.com to take your free financial fitness assessment. Find out how financially fit you really are. See you next week, young millionaires to be.